Welcome to our deep dive into U.S. history. It's going to be like taking a fast-track tour through the past.
Mm.
We're using this really great historical text as our roadmap. And I got to say, I was surprised by some of the things I learned while I was getting ready.
Oh, yeah.
Like, did you know that even before Columbus arrived, there were already these amazing civilizations thriving in the Americas?
Really?
Yeah, we're not just talking about little villages here. We're
Yeah.
talking about advanced cities, complex societies.
Mm.
And they had these breakthroughs in astronomy and math that are just mind-blowing. And of course, we'll also be looking at the not-so-great parts of U.S. expansion and the constant struggle for equality throughout the country's history.
You know, that's what I find so fascinating about U.S. history. It's full of these contradictions. It's a story of innovation and progress, but also of conflict and struggle. As we go through this deep dive, I'm really interested to see what themes or patterns stand out to you.
Okay, so let's rewind all the way back to the pre-colonial era. Now, you might have heard the phrase empty continent used to describe the Americas before Europeans showed up. But let me tell you, that couldn't be further from the truth.
Absolutely. Think about the major civilizations that thrived in Central and South America. The Maya with their intricate calendar system. The Aztecs with their massive city of Tenochtitlan built right on a lake. And the Incas with their vast empire stretching across the Andes Mountains.
And up in North America, you had equally impressive cultures, each with their own unique way of life. Like the Hopi people in the Southwest built these incredible cliff dwellings that are still standing today. And the Iroquois Confederacy in the Northeast had this sophisticated political system that actually influenced the founding fathers of the United States.
It's really remarkable how these cultures adapted to their environments. From the arid deserts of the Southwest to the dense forests of the East Coast, Native Americans found ingenious ways to thrive in all these different landscapes. They were masters of agriculture, hunting, and trade. And their societies were so rich in tradition and spirituality.
It's amazing to think about the incredible diversity of these cultures and their deep connection to the land. But unfortunately, their world was about to be turned upside down with the arrival of Europeans.
And that brings us to a very somber chapter, the devastating impact of European diseases on native populations. Because they had no immunity to diseases like smallpox and measles, entire communities were wiped out. It's estimated that as many as 90% of Native Americans in some areas just perished.
It's a stark reminder of the unintended consequences of exploration and contact between different worlds. And it also sets the stage for the complexities of the colonial era, a period where European powers were all competing for control of this new world.
It's fascinating to see how different European countries approached colonization. The Spanish, driven by a thirst for gold and the desire to convert Native Americans to Christianity, established a hierarchical system in their colonies, often exploiting indigenous labor.
Meanwhile, the French were more focused on fur trading. They developed a different strategy. They forged alliances with Native American tribes, working together to establish a vast trading network that stretched from the Great Lakes all the way to the Gulf of Mexico.
And then you have the British settling along the eastern seaboard and establishing 13 colonies that would eventually become the United States. Unlike the Spanish or the French, the British were primarily interested in land and resources, and they encouraged permanent settlements, which led to more conflict with Native Americans.
Can you imagine how different the U.S. might be today if the French had dominated instead of the British? Would we be speaking French, eating croissants for breakfast? It's wild to think about how those early colonial choices shaped the trajectory of an entire nation.
Those what-if questions are always so intriguing. They make you think about how seemingly small events can have these massive ripple effects throughout history.
So we've got these 13 British colonies developing along the East Coast, but they're still under British rule. But eventually those colonists started to get restless. They were tired of being told what to do by a king thousands of miles away. What were some of the key factors that sparked the American Revolution?
I remember learning about taxation without representation in school, but was it really just about taxes?
Well, the taxes were definitely a major source of frustration. The colonists felt it was unfair to be taxed by a government they had no say in, but there's more to it than that British economic policies were restricting colonial trade and limiting their westward expansion.
So it's like the colonists felt trapped, both economically and geographically. They wanted the freedom to govern themselves and chart their own destiny.
Exactly, and those feelings of discontent were simmering for years before they finally boiled over. And then, bam, the Declaration of Independence hits the scene,
Yeah.
July 4th, 1776.
A date every American remembers, for sure.
It's such a powerful document, declaring the colony's right to break away from British rule. You know, I always get chills when I read those words about all men being created equal and having these unalienable rights. life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
But declaring independence was one thing. Actually winning a war against the mighty British Empire, that was a whole other challenge.
It's amazing when you think about how bold those colonists were. They were going up against a superpower, a global empire with a way bigger and better equipped army.
Yeah, think about the odds stacked against them. It's like David versus Goliath. But in this case, David actually wins. The American Revolution is a testament to the colonists' determination, their strategic brilliance, and maybe even a little bit of luck.
So after years of fighting, the colonists finally win, and a new nation is born, the United States of America. And they have this radical idea. They're going to create a government where the people have the power.
And that's where the Constitution comes in. It's the blueprint for this brand new experiment in self-governance. It sets up a federal republic system dividing power between the national government and the individual states.
And who better to lead this brand new nation than George Washington, the war hero, the symbol of unity, the guy who could have been king but chose to be president instead.
But figuring out the details of this new government wasn't easy. There were some intense debates and compromises made along the way, like the Great Compromise, which settled the argument between large states and small states over how they would be represented in Congress.
It's fascinating how those early debates about federal power versus states' rights are still relevant in American politics today. But let's not forget about that other defining characteristic of American history, the constant push westward. In 1803, President Thomas Jefferson makes this incredible deal, the Louisiana Purchase. He buys this massive chunk of land from France, doubling the size of the United States in one go.
Think about the sheer size of that acquisition. It included land from the Mississippi River all the way to the Rocky Mountains. The Louisiana Purchase really fueled the idea of manifest destiny, this belief that it was America's God-given right to expand across the whole continent.
It's like they couldn't resist the pull of the West, the promise of new opportunities, the allure of the frontier. But this expansion, while it did create economic growth and opportunity for many, came at a huge cost to Native Americans.
You're right. Tribes were forcibly removed from their ancestral lands. Their cultures were disrupted. Their treaties were broken. The Trail of Tears. The forced relocation of the Cherokee Nation from the southeast to Oklahoma stands as a tragic reminder of the dark side of westward expansion.
It's a painful chapter in U.S. history, one that we can't ignore. But unfortunately, the story gets even darker as we move towards the mid-19th century. How could a nation founded on the ideals of liberty and equality be torn apart by the issue of slavery?
It's a question that still haunts us today. The Civil War was the result of decades of simmering tensions over slavery, the morality of it, the economic impact, and the political implications.
The South's economy was completely dependent on slave labor, while the North was becoming more industrialized and morally opposed to slavery.
And you have this growing divide between those who believed in states' rights. The idea that each state should have the power to decide whether or not to allow slavery, and those who believe that the federal government should have the power to abolish it.
And in the middle of all this is Abraham Lincoln, a figure who represents both the complexities and the hopes of this era.
Lincoln, a man who came from humble beginnings to become president, was a deeply moral person who really struggled with the evils of slavery. His Gettysburg Address, delivered on the battlefield of one of the war's bloodiest battles, is still a masterpiece of American oratory.
You remember those famous lines? 'Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Lincoln was determined to preserve the Union and to make sure that the nation lived up to its founding ideals.
The Civil War, a brutal conflict that killed over 600,000 Americans, finally ended in 1865 with the defeat of the Confederacy. Slavery was abolished. But the challenges of rebuilding a nation and bringing a divided society back together still lay ahead.
And that's where Reconstruction comes in. What was supposed to be a time of healing and reconciliation turned into a battleground for the soul of the nation.
Imagine the enormity of the task, bringing the Confederate States back into the Union, integrating formerly enslaved people into society, and rebuilding the South's devastated economy.
It was a period of incredible hope and possibility, but also of immense challenges and setbacks.
The federal government tried to protect the rights of newly freed African Americans, but they faced fierce resistance from white Southerners who wanted to maintain white supremacy. This led to the creation of Jim Crow laws, a system of segregation and disenfranchisement that would plague the South for decades to come.
It's a reminder that the fight for equality is rarely straightforward. There are often steps forward and steps back, and the struggle continues long after the initial victory. It's like the nation went through this huge growth spurt after the Civil War.
Mm.
The Industrial Revolution was transforming America, bringing these incredible advancements in technology and manufacturing.
Yeah, you see railroads connecting the vast distances of the country, cities booming with new industries, and a wave of immigrants arriving from Europe, all looking for opportunity in this land of
It's
promise.
like the U.S. was becoming a global powerhouse. But this rapid industrialization also created its own set of problems, right?
Absolutely. Think about the impact on workers. You had people working in factories for long hours, often in dangerous conditions,
Wow.
with little pay and no job security. This led to the rise of labor unions, as workers organized to fight for better wages, safer working conditions, and a voice in the workplace.
It's interesting how these social and economic changes were happening at the same time as the U.S.'s growing role in the world. As we enter the 20th century, you have World War I, World War II, the Cold War, these global conflicts that really tested the nation's strength and resolve.
Each of these conflicts had a huge impact on American society, and its place in the world. World War I really thrust the U.S. onto the global stage, showcasing its military and economic might.
And then World War II, a truly horrific conflict, saw the U.S. emerge as a leader of the Allied forces, playing a decisive role in defeating Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan.
But World War II also brought about these incredible technological advancements, like the atomic bomb, a weapon so powerful it completely changed the balance of power in the world.
The dropping of the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki is a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of war and the ethical dilemmas that come with such powerful technology.
And then we enter the Cold War, a decades-long ideological struggle with the Soviet Union. It was a time of intense paranoia, nuclear anxieties, and proxy wars fought all over the globe.
I remember learning about the Cold War in school and feeling this sense of unease, like the world was constantly on the verge of nuclear war. Think about the bomb shelters, the duck and cover drills, the constant fear that was a part of everyday life for millions of Americans.
The Cold War had a major impact on American culture, politics, and foreign policy. It fueled the arms race, spurred scientific innovation like the space race, and shaped the way the U.S. interacted with other nations for decades.
But while all of this was happening on the world stage, back home another revolution was brewing, the Civil Rights Movement. After decades of segregation and discrimination, African Americans, led by courageous figures like Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, rose up to demand equality and justice.
Think about the Montgomery bus boycott, sparked by Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat on a segregated bus, or the March on Washington, where Dr. King gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech, calling for an end to racism and a nation where his children would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
The Civil Rights Movement achieved some major victories, like the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which outlawed discrimination and guaranteed voting rights for everyone.
Yeah.
But, as we know, the fight for racial equality is far from over. The legacy of slavery and Jim Crow still affects American society today, and the movement for social justice continues to change and grow.
And that brings us to the modern United States, a nation still wrestling with its past while trying to figure out the complexities of the 21st century.
We've seen incredible technological advancements in recent decades, the rise of the internet, personal computers, smartphones, medical breakthroughs that have helped people live longer and healthier lives.
But we're also facing new challenges: globalization, climate change, economic inequality, political polarization issues that require us to learn from the past as we work towards a more just and sustainable future.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? From those early pre-colonial societies to the digital age. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
It really has.
So as we wrap up, what stands out to you most from everything we've talked about? What event, period, or person sparked your interest? What questions are you still thinking about?
It's hard to choose just one, but I think the whole story of the civil rights movement is just so powerful to me. The courage and determination of the people who fought for equality, it's really inspiring.
We encourage you to dig deeper into the areas that caught your attention. Explore different viewpoints, challenge your own assumptions, and keep asking those what-if questions. Because history isn't just a collection of facts and dates. It's a living narrative that shapes who we are and where we're going.
And remember, the story of the United States is still being written. We're all part of this ongoing saga. And understanding the past is crucial for navigating the present and creating the future we want.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into U.S. history. We hope you've learned something new, gotten some new ideas, and most importantly, that you'll keep exploring the fascinating and complex story of this nation.